Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Sue.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, we'll give it a couple minutes here. Bob, you didn't hear from anybody that today was an issue, did you?
Other than Miss Walsh, who will be about a half hour late joining. She had a last minute appointment.
Are we scheduled for 1 hour meeting? Bob, are we scheduled for a 1 hour meeting?
I think it's typically the goal. If we can wrap up, we don't have a large
Not
amount
more
of some important information, I think, but it shouldn't be too lengthy. If you have a hard stop at 9, we can certainly.
I can make it work. I was just
Okay.
looking. There's the beginning, on the main part of this.
Bob, can you hear me? All right,
Excellent.
sorry. Sorry, everybody. We had updates last night. I'm not sure if that's why my computer sound's not working. All right. So we have Todd. We have, and we're just missing George, and we'll send out an email. So we're going to get started. So from the agenda standpoint, this is May 13th, 2021, the Fire EMS Medical Services Task Force. Call the meeting to order. Mr. Shelton, can you take roll?
Alderman Mortland,
Here.
Alderman Allen,
Here.
Mr. Sanders,
Here.
and Mr. Solomon.
Here.
You do have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Shelton. Okay. The meeting minutes of April 15th, 2021 Fire and Emergency Medical Services Task Force have been distributed. How do they look? And then if they look fine, can I get a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes as read.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Solomon. Thank you. Any comments? And then we'll do a overall vote. Approval of the minutes. Everybody in favor of approving the minutes, just say aye.
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 Any nays? Nope. Okay. The minutes from April 15th, 2021 have been approved. All right. So the core purpose of this meeting today is to review the feedback from both the Ways and Means and the Police, Fire, and EMS commissions, and we've also had some other conversations. So as you last recall, in our last meeting of April 15th, we asked Mr. Shelton and city staff to go through and look at option 3, 4, and 5, or 4, 5, and 6 really, and prioritize those. Some of the feedback came back and asked us to look at 3 light. So Mr. Shelton has provided us the updated options as of 5/12, and that's the Excel document that he'll bring up in just a minute. But would it be better to go through the questions first, Mr. Shelton, or would you rather go through the scenario option
Why
details?
don't we go through the scenarios just as a little bit of a reminder of kind of those options, and for anybody who may be watching the meeting, because there were obvious questions, some, I think, assumptions that the committee and task force had arrived at, that police, fire, Ways and Means weren't familiar with, and I understand that they haven't been attending these meetings. So I think it may be helpful if we just kind of go through the options, and then I can give a quick review of any changes that were made there, and then we can go into the questions if that's okay.
That works, Mr. Shelton. Proceed.
Thank you. Morgan, if we can go ahead and bring up our spreadsheet. So as was stated in the email, this update as of yesterday reflects several things. First of all, the new assessed values based on St. Louis County, and we gave you those charts, but basically your residential values went up 39 million citywide, and the total, including residential, commercial, and personal property, went up a little over 76 million. So I guess don't feel bad if your assessment went up, right? It looks like a lot of them did. And obviously property values are increasing. So that's reflected in these numbers. Also, a key number that has been updated is the Census Bureau gave us the 2019 median appraised house in Town and Country. Previously, we had been using 650,000, which was the number. That's gone up as well and is now 735,000. So when we take what the average homeowner, again, this would be residential, commercial, but we just use the residential median as a mark to kind of give people an idea of how these scenarios would play out. So that's been reflected. The overall assessments countywide for the citywide has been updated, and at the Fire and Police Task Force, or I'm sorry, Commission, had asked that we include, and I agree, some an amount to acquire some property over at the salt mill. Although we own the property where the salt storage is, additional property would be needed. So as a plug, we put in $1 million. So MoDOT owns the ground. They're most likely going to want something. We'll ask for a donation, but we put in $1 million in response to that. So that changed 3 light and 4, right? Assuming the city would need to acquire some additional property for those. So as you can see, the rates have gone down because you need less of a rate, but the amount per median household has gone up. So in the first one, the rate would be 48 cents, and that would be $670. And that's just to upgrade the current station and return some staffing.
Bob, could I ask a question quickly?
Sure.
For
Yeah,
the purpose of, thank you. For the purpose of clarification for anyone listening to this online, also, can you define median? I mean, there's 50 and the same number of homes above that as below, correct?
thank you.
It's not
Yes, that's a good explanation. Right.
Just so people understand that.
No, that's a good point.
Thank you.
Okay. And again, these numbers assume that you would need to assess the total amount necessary to recover the revenue. Obviously, the city could pay in some amount of this. You wouldn't necessarily have to have this total amount of property tax. But to make these scenarios even, we've based it on that assumption. This is the tax you would need, residential, commercial, to get to that amount of revenue. Okay. So basically, the only change other than the change in median value of what it would cost the median household is for those scenarios 3 light and 4. And it's a minor change because to get to that 1 million, it's $100,000 citywide annually, since we'd be financing that over 15 years. So there's a little bump in each of those scenarios. So again, this is just an update, and the countywide values may change a little bit, and we'll continue to update. But this is the major change going from the 2019, 2020 numbers. So any questions on this?
No, go ahead, Ted. Go ahead, Ted.
I'm sorry. I guess my question is, you said that the census has the median appraised value at 736. How are they getting the appraised value of properties? I mean, how was there? Maybe I'm confused with the term appraised. Then,
Yeah,
is that
it's an excellent question, and we just pull that from the U.S. Census Bureau,
right?
And I don't know, to be honest, if they ask people or if they're basing it on statistics, if they go to county records. To be honest, I'm not sure how they pull that.
Okay, because it looks like it went up almost $100,000. So,
Yeah.
You know, I think part of what we have to look at is when we present it, you know, Ways and Means is one thing, but when we present it to the public, you know, everybody wants the market value to be as high as it could be until it comes tax time, right? So, you know, they're gonna question how we got this figure and how we're getting to it. So we just have to, I guess, have our ducks in a row with it. That's all.
And what we would be able to do is actually put out a calculator where you can plug in what your actual appraised home value is.
Right.
And then it would tell you, right? So if it's below this or above this, you could do that.
Right.
So, but that's a good question. And
Okay.
what I was going to say is we kind of move into our questions. If there are any of these questions we have or comments and you all want clarification or you have some of your own, I think this is a perfect opportunity to do that, right? And so we will add in, Todd, to our questions. How's this number arrived at, this approach? Okay.
Thank you.
Good point. Anything else on this?
So just one quick question on the number 5, with those change in appraised values, Chief Sadler, has that made any adjustment on 5 and 6?
5 and 6 have not been adjusted on this sheet for the fire district numbers. No, sir.
Okay, so we
would need to adjust ours, which we already know based on the preliminary assessments that we got a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago. These will be, our number would be at least 5 cents lower for each, for both 5 and 6. And with the updated assessment numbers, I would expect that to drop even further. But we haven't had a chance to run the numbers yet. We just got these last night.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Good question. Okay, if there isn't anything else on this, Alderman, if it's okay with you, we'll go ahead and move into the questions.
Most definitely.
Please.
Okay, so as you all are aware and was requested from this task force, we went to Alderman Allen, took the proposals or the options to the Ways and Means Commission, and Alderman Mortland took it to Police, Fire, and EMS. So I know Mr. Sanders was at the Police, Fire, and EMS meeting, as was Chief Sadler. And so if there's any clarification you have on any of these, for the most part, I believe the operational questions came out of Police, Fire, and the finance questions came out of Ways and Means, but there was some crossover, which is absolutely fine. Obviously, Ways and Means had some operational questions.
And Bob, can I just add here, please, that there was really no discussion on this in Ways and Means. They were given the information, and that was pretty much it. We had a full agenda, and there was basically no discussion.
Yeah. And
Thank
so what I have tried to do is more or less consolidate if there's any duplication of questions and try to clarify. But just to begin getting these down. And as we kind of walk through them, if there's any initial reaction, either from myself, Chief Sadler, anybody here, I think we can go ahead and do that. Otherwise, some of these are obviously going to require more research.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The only thing I would just put on the record that Commissioner Tarlas joined. So
Excellent, thank you. So the first one was, do response times include automatic aid or just responses from West County Fire District? I did check with Central County, Mr. Parks over there, who handles all the dispatch and the tracking. And he indicated some of the responses look like they were coming from Frontenac, so that this would include other units arriving. Chief, would that be your understanding as well?
Yes, sir. The response times include all units, and to answer, to move to question 2 as well, it will include our fire station on Manchester.
Okay.
So it's
So I guess, thank you, Chief. To kind of clarify, these aren't just the response times from the town and country station at Clayton and Mason. This is whoever's arriving on scene first, including our automatic aid. Okay. So the next one then really is number 3, pros, cons of annexation. I think that would be a meeting in itself. So just letting everybody know, that's kind of a question that was asked. The next one, number 4, request more detail on the review process for the options presented and those not presented. So if there were any options that this task force considered that weren't presented, I guess the request is for any clarification.
So, and to that point, Mr. Shelton, we did have other options that, like conversations. I don't know if we just, for the communication to the public, we need to note those and have just a separate either page or a separate section previously discussed, but not move forward options.
Okay.
And a description of why,
Okay. The next question was number 5. What happens to response times in Ward 2 and 3 with 2 new fire stations? And Chief, we'll throw to you.
Yeah, we've done analysis, which I'm happy to share on the response times for the entire city. Actually, for the entire the area we're responsible for. So it balances things out. There's some areas that are going to, obviously the area is directly surrounded by the existing fire station. The response times are going to be a little bit slower than they are now. There's also going to be some significant improvements in the areas that are substandard right now. The nice thing about what we've looked at and where we're kind of plotting the stations is there is a benefit to having our fire station at Mason and Manchester because that supports Ward 2 as things stand now. So there is a little bit of a lag for a couple areas in Ward 2, but beyond that, and I'm not making light of it, it definitely balances the service through the city. And we can share that information with the task force and whoever needs. It's no secret. Happy to share it.
So, Chief Sadler, quick question on that. I'm a very chart visual kind of guy.
Uh-huh.
So, and I might not be the only one who's like that. So it might be helpful, at least for me, to wrap my hands around it, because I think that's honestly question number 5. I think that's a great question. So there was a slide we had a while back that showed each ward and what the response time was. And with that slide also came you had layers of risk that was involved. If you're more than 2 minutes, this is the damage that could be done. If it's 5 minutes, it's damage. If it was 8 minutes and it's catastrophic, you had levels of concern depending on the response time. So is there a way, to their point, if we get 2 new stations, to revamp that chart? And so this way it might be easier for someone in Ward 2 to see, okay, response times were fantastic. They were 1 minute, now it's 1:30. I mean, to them, that might seem okay. But I just think we're going to have to dive a little deeper on this to make people feel comfortable with it. And for me personally, to really understand, I'm in Ward 4. So does that mean that I'm now in the safe zone, or am I still kind of, squandering it? So
Actually, if I can email while we're doing this, I can email Bob, who would you recommend me sending this to that can put it on the screen? But I've got some updated maps.
If you have Morgan's email.
Yep. I will send it to her now.
Great.
And this is going to be, again, it's kind of like number 3. That may be part of the pros and cons of annexation meeting, where we dive a little bit deeper into what it really looks like. But let me share this map with her for now, and we can come back to it when she gets it.
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, can I add something too? The answer to our first question about the response times from Central Committee. And basically, we don't have really any hard data on that. And I know there are individuals who are looking for, what do we get or not get response times from West County? So will there be a way to dig down and figure out, assuming any call that goes out, we would also have the data, hopefully, of when West County got there, regardless of if another entity got there before.
So, Alderman, I apologize, we do have that data. We do get those reports from Central County, and they show.
Okay, we will have.
Yeah, and I'd be glad to share that information as well. Shows when the call went out, when the unit was dispatched, when the unit arrived on scene, if there was a transport. It's very, very, very detailed. And so we do have that information.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The next one was question number 6 is keeping the current station location impactful to response times if a second station was located elsewhere. I believe this is in reference to options 3, 4, and 5, where we talked about keeping 3, 3 light, just 3 and 3 light, then really keep the existing station, build a new station. Chief, any thoughts on that?
I have a lot of thoughts on it. Keeping the existing fire station and adding a second fire station, obviously we're gonna get a benefit in one of the deficient areas in the ward. Assuming we go towards Salt Mill, there's going to be a benefit to that Ward 4 area. It's sort of solving half the problem, so it's there's a benefit to it. It's just not if we, as we've discussed, if we're going to, and I kind of defer to the task force members, and their thought was, if we're going to solve the problem, let's solve it. And that's leaving the existing fire station is, as you're aware, the expense of operating it is half the battle. So there is a benefit to adding a second station and keeping the existing one. It's just not solving the entire problem.
Okay.
Bob, at some point then, might it be good to identify the cost of operations of the existing if, say, okay, we do have inefficiencies of it being an old building and the whole scenario, can we get some numbers to compare the operating cost of existing fire station as compared to operations of a new one or different one?
Yeah, we've got those numbers, and actually we've shared them, and we can do that again. It's not a, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually, when Mr. Tarlis and Mr. Solomon met with Chief, we went through those numbers in detail, but we'll be sure to have that information for this entire.
Again, for the whole discussion, I think
Yep.
that
Fair
to
enough.
happen. Thank you.
Number 7, what are the conditions for annexation and can you get out? Do we get representation? I don't believe once you're annexed and you're part of the fire district that you could just remove yourself. And then I know we have discussed, obviously, if Town and Country is part of the fire district, a resident of Town and Country can run for the 3-member fire board. Is that correct, Chief?
That is correct.
Do we need a consultant? My own personal opinion is once you would narrow down a recommendation, you may want a consultant who specializes in this to look at your recommendation. I don't know that you want a consultant at this part. I think at this point, I think you're still putting together numbers, but that's something I think you keep on the table, in my opinion. The question came up at police fire, what does option 2 benefit us for the cost? And I know Mr. Sanders was at that meeting, Alderman Mortland, Chief. I think that question was, what do we really get by building a new station and moving it a little bit down the street? Am I correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
I concur.
I think that's a fair question.
Yeah. Agreed.
For the cost, what do you get? Okay. Number 10, the question came up, have traffic patterns, signals, road configuration been factored into the response times for 2 new stations? I see the chief shaking his head yes.
Yes, sir.
All righty. Okay, moving on to our expense-related questions. Ways and Means obviously asked for more detail on the expense assumptions and options. They asked, what is the timing of any tax proposal? Obviously, you would have to, the Board of Aldermen would have to put any tax proposal forward, and they have to go on a general ballot, and there's certain elections, April, November, and I believe August. But that would be the timing. Obviously, there's an education component. Item number 3 was, how do the scenarios impact general fund compared to capital fund? So with the city, any of the city options, we do currently pay a portion of the fire contract out of the capital fund, that 160 that goes towards capital. Everything else comes out of the general fund. And Sue, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think the theory at Ways and Means is the general fund is obviously limited. We have a little bit more availability in capital fund. So if you can spend on capital, and under some of these scenarios, if you're building a new station for $5 million, that could be spent on a capital. We don't have $5 million in the capital fund. So I don't know, and I don't know where you would get your additional capital, but we can definitely get an answer to that question.
I agree.
Then it came up at police fire, and I believe Deputy Chief Frazier addressed this, but Chief, why is option 5 less costly than option 4?
I don't have all of the options directly in front of me. As option 4 was the city paying for the
Correct, and option 5 was being annexed by the fire district.
Yeah, our direct tax rate, as it's factored, that would be the cost of doing it, and I assume it ties into economies of scale related to operating 4 engine houses as opposed to 2 and paying that directly out of your, you implementing the tax as opposed to us. We've put it into our calculator, and that's where we're at. And we also, as if we were to annex Town and Country into the fire district, we would be able to build those stations without increasing. We can do it out of our existing funds, so we wouldn't need to pay additionally to do that, whereas the city would have to borrow money to do it.
Exactly. I think that was the big one there, is that we would obviously have to finance that. Number 5, what are staffing level and expenses, employee expenses over time? Obviously, we didn't model that, but like anything, like any operation, those expenses increase. So I don't know if you have a historical number, if it's 2%.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, the staffing levels are what we've talked about. When we get to, we've discussed being short 3 firefighters currently. I think getting back to having full staffing at the existing fire station, and then if we were to deploy another an additional fire station, it would be at full staffing. So that would, you're at 6 paramedic firefighters per station each day. So you're looking at 18 new employees basically for an additional fire station. The employee expenses over time, you know, we're typically, we look at generally 1% increases as things play out. We're not looking at heavy increases over time. They're pretty low percentage wise.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. What is the value of the current station? I'm sure this came up out of a Ways and Means member, but if you were to build 2 new stations, sell the current station, that's all a factor of what the city would permit to go there, would be the majority of what would drive the value of that. So the end use is what would drive the cost or the value of that property. Then those that were kind of combined, at least I thought, under operation expense questions, could we house an ambulance at Missouri Baptist Hospital and rent some office space? I'm sure you could, and Chief, I kind of took this to be the thought of that we discussed at police fire of the benefit of having, if you're going to do, say, 3 light, a second apparatus strategically located someplace else, that would be a pumper, and that would not be a standalone ambulance.
Correct. And I can't speak for Missouri Baptist. I think that would be a question for them. It would surprise me a little bit if they were open to that conversation, but I'm not. It's an interesting concept that I don't think solves the issue.
And again, maybe so we back up to the concept of if you had a scenario of 3 light and you were going to maintain the existing station and build a second facility with 1 apparatus, you would recommend that be a pumper and not an ambulance.
Absolutely. And as we've discussed it with, I think both of the groups, the resource, the fire resource that has paramedics with all of the medical equipment on it, but also can address fire issues, is far more beneficial to the residents of Town and Country. So there's no question.
And again, as this task force has talked about, that's kind of the model that's operated both in City of Webster Groves and the City of Ladue.
That's correct.
Okay.
among others. There's a lot of areas that operate fire resources without necessarily having an ambulance in the fire station.
And then the last one was, could the city take over ambulance service or contract with Abbott?
Is that being directed to me?
Sure, if you have a response, I don't.
I don't know that I have. I think the city can opt to do whatever the city chooses to do. I think that would be, Bob, you've had some experience contracting with a private ambulance service in the past, and you could probably speak more to it in terms of the reasons why you went the direction you went. I would strongly advise otherwise for, again, consistent service to the city, which I believe the residents deserve. I think the model that you've chosen is head and shoulders above what you would get from that option. There again, that would be a question that would be directed to the city, I would assume.
And I would just throw out, and for anybody that doesn't know, so Abbott is a private ambulance service. They do serve some areas, I believe, maybe Rock Hill and portions of Maplewood, where they strategically locate an ambulance and then respond, right? The pumper for those departments goes out, and then Abbott does the transport.
Correct.
You never really know where that ambulance might be, and it's totally up to them. And so I don't know of anybody around us nearby that utilizes Abbott. So I don't know that Abbott would even want to come in here and locate an ambulance. But again, they do private transport as well. So they may be running a nursing home transport, or a patient to the hospital, non-emergency, and then they're not available to you. So, and then the city doing ambulance service, we don't have any paramedics on staff that I'd be able to deploy. It would require hiring paramedics and equipment.
Mr. Shelton, I just want to note, we do have a good relationship and partnership with West County EMS and Chief Sadler. We're just getting asked, are we looking at other options as we turn all these stones? So that this is more transparency question than anything else, I would think, but just kind of going through those conversations. So
that's all of the questions we have at this point that have been submitted. We asked that they all be submitted by last Friday. So I don't know if we'll have more or not, but.
Okay, I have a comment. Can I?
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Todd. Go ahead, Todd. Oh, you didn't have.
Wasn't me.
Oh, okay. I do have a question, if no one else is ready. The question related to Missouri Baptist, and that even if that was a scenario, to me, Missouri Baptist has a lot of issues with location and highway. If we were looking at doing something like that, to me, Missouri Baptist would not be the best scenario, location, whatever. So, that question could be turned into or modified using some other possible locations for that.
Right, and I agree with the statement made earlier. I think, Bob, you mentioned that we're just turning over every rock, to make sure that everything's looked at and all options are there. But I think the concept of looking to, my own personal opinion from the information we've covered over the past few months, all we're doing is it seems like our goal is to try to control our own destiny a little bit here. And if we start looking to outsource, if we take over one destiny, if we're trying to control destiny in one direction with one, by then adopting another one where we lose our control, I just feel like we're really kind of treading water, and that's probably not the best process to be at. Chief Sattler, I do have one clarifying question though. Number 5, where it came to staffing questions. So are you saying, I might have misheard you, but you said for each new station, it's about 18 new employees, and there's 3 more you want. So we're looking at about a total of 21 employees if we do the option where we have 2 new stations and stuff like that? Is it?
That is, yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
I'm doing the math in my head as well.
And the economics of each station that we were covering before, that includes being fully staffed, or is that just the cost of the station itself?
That includes the rates that we've shown are all in.
Okay.
Everything.
Okay.
Including land acquisition?
Yes, sir. For us,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. So, other questions? Mr. Shelton, what was your feel on a couple of the questions? Were they? I got a little bit of a feeling they wanted us to investigate a little more on 3 light in some form or fashion as a true option. Number 4, and remember 5 and 6 are kind of combined. So that's where I was left. 1, 3 light, 4, and 5 and 6 combined. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Okay.
Could I add, excuse me, could I add for the record, please, that I just see an email from Amber, Miss Walsh, and she is trying to get on. And then I still don't see her. So she's having technical problems.
Thank you. Other questions? Mr. Sanders, Mr. Tarlas? So we don't have questions. What are the thoughts on how to move forward for more communication, like documentation, as we continue to potentially remove some of the ones that are not going to be there. So number 2 and number 3 from the equation, and moving them down to reviewed options, but not considered in the final. Many other thoughts, task force, on how to communicate, how to move forward on this?
I think we need to revisit number 3, which is the pros and cons of annexation, as well as question number 5, what happens response time. So, and we suggested a separate meeting on that, but maybe I don't know if we have an interim meeting before our next meeting on that, or if we just have data that we review. But, I think, ironically enough, I think we'll have pushback on annexation from people who just truly don't understand the purpose of it. They might feel we're doing all this and we're building all, town and country is going to have all these great new resources. Why are we handing it over? So I think we need to dive into that a little bit more, just so we have all the facts and be ready to present that. But moving forward, I think we need 3 and 5, I think, need to be clarified a little bit. And then we just look at the economics and 2 and 3, it's just, again, the purpose of all this is not to stay status quo or move the needle a little bit, right? I mean, the object is to come to a solution, so we're not revisiting this every year or every 4 or 5 years, something that's a long-term solution. So, some of these options are not long-term solutions. It's just doing what we're doing now, and things will continue to get more expensive, and we're going to be bumped around in the waves a little bit. So.
Most definitely. So from the standpoint, Mr. Shelton and Chief Sadler, could you outline pros and cons of the annexation from both sides? And we can start having that conversation from both sides. I truly think we need to pro and con all of them. And so all the options that we were 1, 3, 3 light, 4, and then 5, 6 combined, to where that the story will, I'm envisioning a PowerPoint or something like that going back through, really the service level, the response time and the overall public safety concerns across each one of those, to where as we communicate and most likely we bring it to the board and get their input, they have all of the pros and cons for each scenario. Did you guys hear that?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was on mute and I was talking away. So
We heard you.
We heard you. We heard you.
We heard you.
okay, good. All right. So Mr. Shelton, is that something, I know we have some other documents that have that, but it's kind of like we're at the point where we need to take this Excel sheet, some of the questions, and go into like each option into like a PowerPoint.
I agree. And what I may suggest is that we look at, as an example, 3 light and ask the chief to apply some estimated response times. We don't always know exactly what it's going to be. And then we take the 5 or 4 or 5 with the 2 stations, see what those response times are, present that information, and then how do we get to whichever one we believe, the pros and cons, in addition to response times of those options, and then what's the best way to approach it. Does that make sense?
Sounds good.
Could we come up also with some estimated timing? I mean, we all know a decision has to be ready December 31st. But as far as timing of the whole process, so we don't move further down and then all of a sudden we don't have a lot of time to address certain aspects of information and process. At some point, can we identify, like, by the, I don't know, September 1st, we expect to be at a certain point, or just, have some clear-cut expectations?
Definitely. I think the key date, Alderman, is when a suggestion or suggestions go from this task force to the Board of Aldermen.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we need to decide when that expectation is.
Correct.
Okay.
I would say we're getting close to that, to where, after one more meeting of this and reviewing the pros and cons and having these items, to be able to take that back to the board would be, would be reasonable. I don't know if anybody else disagrees. I know this task force has gone through a lot of details and a lot of discussions, and I think we're at the point where here's the data, here's the recommendations, here's the conversation behind the data, and get some feedback there, and then let that kind of drive the next step in this equation, which would be, what's the long-term solution and what's the process to get through the long-term solution, and lay that out for each option. And then what is if we're going to bring a consultant in to review the last couple options, then lastly, what is the short-term need with regards to the current agreement, and how do we handle that?
Right. And ideally, those discussions can be more in person and in a different format than what we've had, and hopefully things will be changing. I think that's important.
Yep. So, from there, I think Mr. Shelton and Chief Sadler, you guys got some feedback. Mr. Shelton, if we can work on creating that PowerPoint and going through those pros and cons and kind of, what our I'll call it our path forward is. Let's take this to the board. Let's identify, maybe narrow it down, bring in a consultant if desired, and then, answer some of these other questions that are on there, so that are highly relevant. I think the keys, the pros and cons are going to show most of the information, but traffic signal, road configuration, land acquisition, all those things are going to be questions that come up, that if we just have, some information to provide our citizens. I think that'd be key. And then we can review it one more time, take it to the Board of Aldermen, and then figure out the next direction we're going from there. Does that work, Mr. Shelton?
Yes, and definitely Chief Sadler and I will get started on that. Just as a point of information, we do have the response times that Chief Sadler sent to Morgan, but what I may recommend is that we just include those as we kind of discussed in the options. Chief, does that work for you?
For sure. Yeah.
Instead of trying to delve into that right now, we'll just kind of include those various response times applied to the various options. That good?
That'd be great. I know Chief has his, we have West County, you have the Central County, and getting that data will help support and tell the story. So, any other thoughts from the task force? Are you, I'm sorry, I had to switch to my phone. Is everyone good with that? Mr. Charles, Mr. Solomon, Mr. Sanders, are you all good with that approach?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Ryan. Exactly what you said. I mirror that.
Okay.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we have a plan forward, and hopefully we have a point to where we can get to that next step. So, Mr. Shelton, when it would be a reasonable amount of time that you could have this reviewed and have us ready to kind of look at the final copy? And if you need our help in the middle, we can obviously collaborate with you.
Late summer, no. Let's see what we could come up with. So I'm thinking the first week of June. Chief, what do you think?
Sorry, trying to unmute. Good Lord. Yeah, that works for me. Unless Memorial Day is going to throw you off. It shouldn't.
If
I don't
we're
think
like Thursday the 3rd, if we're sticking to Thursdays, that's not a problem with me.
Works for me.
Task force, Thursday, 3rd, 8 a.m.
Good for me.
Yeah, it's good for me.
Yes. Fine by me.
Sounds like we have a schedule, and we'll have that. So it gives you roughly 3 weeks, Mr. Shelton. Please reach out for any help, anything you need from that standpoint. But this is going to be more of the, we'll call it the draft of the polish, so we can polish it up before we take it to the Board of Aldermen and in the meantime, we are discussing it with the Board of Aldermen, but this would be more of a formal presentation. Okay. All right. Well, so we have our next meeting set, and is there any other items any other comments or items? And if not, it's 8:59. We're right on time. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Mr. Sanders, is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Tarlas. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Thank you all for your time, and we'll send out the information and the calendar invite.